From preconception to pregnant. So, with all of the preconception talk recently, you may have been wondering if another baby might be down the road for me. And while it was always the plan to have a fourth little one in our family, this time around it came a little bit quicker than we anticipated. So, I am pregnant and we are due right at the end of December, so Christmas Day or December 28th, depending if you go off of the traditional first cycle day calculation of a due date, or if you go off of mine, which looks at my specific cycle length and then calculating the due date from that. So my calculation's December 28th, the other one's December 25th, which Christmas Day due date sounds a lot cooler. So I'm just saying we are due at Christmas. And we all know a due date is an estimate. So somewhere around the end of December. I was caught off guard this time around. And to be honest, our first three pregnancies were all conceived the very first cycle of trying. And I know that is not the case for many, but I do share that because when we support the body preconception proactively, that truly can be the case. And I think we hear so many stories on the fertility lens, which are certainly front of mind for so many right now, where fertility can be a struggle, but it also can work as God designed, where it is that very first cycle. If our fertility health is optimal, you will conceive anytime you have intimacy within that fertile window. And I have found that to be true for me. So, our first three were conceived on that first cycle of intentionally trying to conceive. And this fourth little one, God had a plan for us. And I will just say that I had switched where I was charting and skipped a cycle of charting because I was just doing that one in my head. And then I was going to start fresh on a new app in April. And that is when I conceived. So if you ever plan to switch where you are tracking, make sure you track on both for about 3 months because these apps that predict your fertile window need about 3 to 4 cycles to get to understand you and your body before they can more accurately predict when that fertile window is. So that was my fault, and I should know that as a provider. But you are busy in the season and the rhythm of motherhood and owning a business, and I just kind of let that fall to the wayside of tracking for 1 month, and here we are. So we are excited. Again, we have always wanted a fourth little soul to love on. The timing of this one is just a little tricky because we are in a rental home, and our rental home has one bathroom and three tiny bedrooms. And so it'll be a little tricky where we're placing the bassinet in our bedroom because we don't have a ton of space. So just little things like that. But again, coming from a place of gratitude and understanding, like, it's okay. We'll figure this out. We are also planning to start digging for a new home build later this summer. And initially, we were supposed to have dug already in early spring of 2025, and our builder pushed us back to late summer, early fall. And so that timeline is just also a struggle where I had always envisioned, if we were to add a family member, it to occur in this new home. And that's just not going to be the case. And again, so letting go of my vision for how I thought that this fourth pregnancy would unfold and instead leaning into God has a different plan and that's okay. And I hope that meets you where you are because I know a surprise pregnancy happens for others. And I also know that sometimes that pregnancy is delayed compared to where you want it at. And so, no matter which end of the spectrum that you find yourself on, God's timing is always better than our own. I frequently remind myself of, and sometimes it's when we look back on it that we realize, gosh, that's why, but sometimes in the moment that can be a big shock to work through, again, on either end of the spectrum, whether you have a surprise pregnancy or are struggling to get that positive test. So this time around, what's really interesting is that I did not have that 3 months set aside to prepare my body preconception. Now, if you've been following my journey for a while, between my second and my third child, I, on purpose, stopped breastfeeding at 15 months to give myself 3 months of intentional preconception planning prior to trying to conceive and conceiving at 18 months postpartum, having conceived my third child. And that pregnancy, that third pregnancy, I had zero first trimester symptoms. I am talking, I did not even feel like I was pregnant. I mean, maybe a little bit of fatigue, but zero nausea, zero food aversions. And this pregnancy was with a boy, but comparing that to my second pregnancy, where I also had a boy and was sick for the first 17 weeks of pregnancy, I threw up all over myself in my car on my way to work one day. I had significant food aversions during that second pregnancy and just always underlying nausea. And that lasted for 17 weeks. And that was with the boy as well. And then comparing to my first pregnancy, where I was nauseous, food aversions, all of that for about 14 weeks. And I think it was worse with my second than it was with my first. Again, he was a boy and she was a girl. And sometimes they say that your symptoms are worse with a girl. And so for me, that wasn't true. They were worse with my second, who was a boy. But I think it was because I did not intentionally prepare my body preconception for that second pregnancy. And I was depleted from that first pregnancy, because anytime our body goes through pregnancy, breastfeeding, we are depleting ourselves of micronutrients. And so if we are not intentionally replacing those, we are starting from a depleted state when we conceive again, and then a depleted state when we conceive again. And so between pregnancy 2 and 3, I wanted a 3-month gap where I was not breastfeeding, I was not creating new life, and I could just focus on replenishing my own nutrient stores. So what that looked like was making sure I was on a really good prenatal. So I've shared before, the Full Well prenatal is what I switched to at that time. And I truly think that was one of the biggest game changers because of the huge influx of micronutrients compared to what I was taking beforehand. Before my third pregnancy, I was taking what looked to be a nice organic vitamin with food-derived ingredients, but it had folic acid in it, which is not as bioavailable for our body to absorb. And it did not have choline in it. And it was 3 pills a day. And I now know, having done so much research in women's health, that it is just impossible to get the amount of micronutrients that our body needs to support pregnancy optimally in 3 pills a day. It's just impossible to get those nutrients broken down enough to be in only 3 pills. And so the 8 pills a day, Full Well, Seeking Health, Needed are all 3 great brands, but we really do need those 8 pills a day to get that level of support that our body needs. So I began taking that every day. I started collagen to support my body's pelvic floor and deep core and uterine healing. I took beef liver, desiccated beef liver, 3 to 4 times a week if I was not getting it in my diet or I was cooking it. So my goal was 3 to 4 days a week, I am getting organ meat in my body and all of those fantastic micronutrients that come along with it, naturally derived folate, B vitamins, etc. And so I was either taking that in the desiccated pill form, in the powder form, mixed into a soup, or with actual ground beef liver mixed with ground beef in a chili or something like that. And so those were the biggest nutrient areas that I was nourishing myself preconception. Now, from baby 3 to 4, I am still breastfeeding baby number 3. He is now about 16 months old, and we're still breastfeeding, and we are now about 8 weeks pregnant as I'm recording this. And so my micronutrient levels are certainly lower, and I have experienced more underlying nausea if I'm not careful to focus on my blood sugar. But overall, no major instances of vomiting or strong food aversions. And I think this is because of the way that I supported my body postpartum following that third child. And I did not take my foot off the gas pedal when it came to those micronutrient needs. So oftentimes women think, okay, postpartum, that lasts 6 months, 12 months, and they're focused on taking their prenatal then, but they don't continue it. I'm still taking mine at 16 plus months postpartum. So I think that made a big difference. I still take the beef liver, I use collagen daily, and then MCT oil. MCT oil is awesome for a healthy form of fat. And so in my coffee, I'll have my breakfast first in the morning, but then coffee, and I put collagen for some protein and then MCT oil, and I froth it together, and it makes a bulletproof coffee, if you will. And it's giving my body good protein and fat right from the start of the day. And then focusing on that balanced diet, whole foods first mentality, where I am definitely making sure that I'm getting 3 square meals a day with good protein, fats, vegetables, fruits on that plate. And honestly, having young children is helpful for that. They have their plates where it's sectioned out, and they have to get those different types of foods on that plate to fill each of the 3 portion sizes on their plate. And so I think of that for myself and for my husband too. And I kept up with all of that. And the other big piece of this would be nervous system regulation. So when our body is very upregulated, when we are in fight or flight mode in that sympathetic state, our body can struggle to conceive and it can struggle to sustain life because it feels like it's not a safe time to do so. And that is something that I have done so much work on, honestly, since my college days, whenever I was working on regulating my cycle on my own. If you have not listened to my very first episode where I talk about my story, I would get 1 cycle a year when I was in high school. And then in college, I, as an exercise science major and nutrition major, learned a lot about the way that exercise and nutrition affects our body and realized I was over exercising, undernourishing. And so I was able to self regulate my cycle at that time. But alongside of that came understanding how to manage stress. And I was valedictorian in high school. I was a very active for sport athlete. I was always go, go, go. Very involved in undergrad as well, all of the different groups you can be a part of. And so I had to learn how to take time for rest and have time where I am just relaxing and not always doing. And that is hard for me as a very type A personality. But in starting my own private practice and leaving that conventional medical world where our schedules are super busy and very stressed and burnout rates are really high, I think that has contributed to my ability to feel really good in this first trimester, even though I didn't give myself those 3 months of specific planning this time around. So, a weekly schedule for me looks like 2 days a week out of the house in the office supporting patients. And then the other days I'm home with my kids and I am still doing administrative work during nap times or after they go to bed. That is the reality of a private practice owner and an entrepreneur, but I am doing it in a way that I absolutely enjoy. I love my work. I love what I do. And I love that I get more days home with my kids than not. And so I think I've developed just a really good routine and rhythm in our daily life that didn't have to overhaul. It didn't have to totally change when I got that positive pregnancy test because I was already supporting my body in a holistically well way, if you will. And it felt safe and it felt able to continue this pregnancy in a way that did not involve giving me symptoms to force me to slow down. And I had this conversation with another provider recently who is also a private practice owner and found out that she is pregnant and is having like significant nausea and vomiting and all of that. And I do think sometimes our body forces us to slow down. If we're not listening to the whispers, our body will scream, right? You've heard that before. And That's true when it comes to pregnancy too. So, if you are listening and you are struggling with some of those first trimester symptoms, I'm going to give you some tips because, as I mentioned, my first two pregnancies, I had those heavy first trimester symptoms, and even into that second trimester with my second child. And it is hard. It is so hard to go about daily life still. But sometimes it is your body screaming to you that the daily rhythms that you have in place right now are not conducive to sustainable wellness. And it's telling you that something needs to change. And so for me, after that second baby, it was moving out of conventional medicine, starting my own private practice, and creating rhythms and routines for myself and my family that supported my nervous system better. And then, of course, making those micronutrient changes. So, what does this look like from a first trimester standpoint? How do we proactively support the body so that both you and baby can thrive? So, number one is listening to fatigue. And this is something that I am proactively doing. I typically like to wake up with the sun if I can, get that morning workout in, and start my day before my children wake up. Since I got that positive pregnancy test, I am sleeping in. I am sleeping in because I know that my body needs more rest. It absolutely does. During the first trimester, if you think about all of the changes that are happening in your womb, it is insane. Your baby is developing eyes, ears, limbs, liver, kidneys, heart, like their whole little body is getting little buds that are forming for each of these organs that are just going to then keep growing throughout your pregnancy. It is absolutely wild when we look at everything that happens that first trimester, and they're the size of a little raspberry right now at 8 weeks. It is wild. So, lean into fatigue. Don't push that aside. I pull back from social commitments and social obligations. By the time this airs, we will have told family and friends, but I am sure as I am recording this, many of them have guessed that I am, just because I turn in earlier than I typically would when we were out hanging out with our neighbors and our kids are playing outside. And I am just a little bit more to myself because I know that my body just needs more downtime, and that's okay. And you don't need to apologize for that. You don't need to explain yourself to other people. You just lean into what feels good for you. And oftentimes that is leaning in to rest. And that might mean staying home from a party because you feel like sitting on the couch, reading a book, and sipping your magnesium and colostrum water, which is what I have been doing recently. And again, that is totally fine. You do not need to apologize to anybody. And in fact, you are going to wake up feeling so much more refreshed and better. And as a mom to three littles already, I know that I need to be present for them. And so taking care of myself is so front of mind, because if I'm not, and if my body is screaming at me and giving me tons of symptoms, forcing me to slow down, I'm not going to be able to show up optimally for them, right? Or my patients. Gosh, they're so front of mind for me right now too, is I want to feel good to support them too. And so leaning into rest is huge. And this is again where if your job does not support having moments of downtime, then maybe talking with your boss or just thinking creatively on how you can make it to be. Okay. So, this is the time to sleep in, slow down, say no to extra commitments that you can decline, right? And lean into giving your body space to do all the hard internal work that it needs to do in this first trimester. Now, the other important note here is that when you're overdoing it, it leads to dehydration oftentimes, and then the dehydration can be what leads to nausea, vomiting, more fatigue, and it becomes this vicious cycle. So first and foremost, slow down, lean into rest, and as you're resting, make sure you're hydrating your body, right? And then it can stop that vicious cycle in its tracks. Now, I have a first trimester survival guide for you. If you DM me guide on Instagram, and select pregnancy as your season, then I will send that guide to you. I will also link it in the show notes for easy access. So download my first trimester guide. I created this initially when going through my third pregnancy and just being mind blown how different it was from my second pregnancy. And holy moly, how much taking this more proactive approach works to feeling good in that first trimester. So if you can do anything in your first trimester of pregnancy, lean into rest and download my guide because it will help walk you through this. Now, nausea and food aversions. So this time around, again, minimal nausea, and I think it's from still breastfeeding and knowing that my nutrient stores aren't quite up to the levels they were between baby 2 and 3, right? So some tricks that I learned from my first 2 pregnancies where I had severe nausea would be to eat smaller, more frequent meals throughout the day. So if you just have 3 large meals throughout the day, your blood sugar has the opportunity to dip between those meals. And when that blood sugar dips is oftentimes when the nausea can come on. So smaller, more frequent meals throughout the day is great. 2, we want to prioritize protein. Legit, every meal or snack should have protein with it. So something to keep in mind would be no naked carbs. So if you, for instance, just feel like you want crackers, that is so common in that first trimester. We just want carbs, right? Pair it with a protein. So maybe you're having crackers with a grass-fed cheese or crackers with a beef stick or crackers with hummus. Okay, you're gonna help stabilize your blood sugar so much better so it doesn't get a big crash after having carbohydrates only. Part 3 would be collagen powder. So I'm giving you 6 tips here. Tip number 3, collagen powder each morning, as I mentioned, to help stabilize that blood sugar and get that added protein punch between meals. So I have that between breakfast and lunch. That way, you're getting a protein hit at that time alongside of that MCT oil where you can also get a healthy fat. Number 4 would be nutrient-dense foods. So if you can't stomach cooking with them, then supplementing, plug your nose if you need to take that beef liver. It's going to give you so many of those little micronutrients that sometimes are what our body is craving. And that's why we're having aversions to different things or why we're having the nausea, just because the body is struggling to support all of its increased demands at that time. So that brings me to then supplements. So we talked about a really high quality prenatal that has methylated folate, not folic acid, and then your desiccated beef liver that you're having the 3 to 4 times a week. And then number 6 would be electrolytes. So these help your water get to where it needs to go. So we talked about how dehydration can be that trigger for nausea, vomiting, all the things. So hydration is huge to avoid nausea. Stay ahead of it with packets of electrolytes. So I use Element. It is quick and easy for me as a busy mom of 3 little ones already. It has no sugar, no food dyes, and no extra gunk, which is a major win. So do not reach for things like Gatorade or Body Armor. You can do Element. You can also do like Taylor Duke's Wellness has a great one. Just Ingredients has one. So potassium, magnesium, and sodium are those key electrolytes that we want to make sure you're getting good amounts of. If you are getting really detailed blood work, you'll be able to see where your numbers come back on those. So some people will be really surprisingly low in sodium. So we want to make sure we're getting a higher dosage of sodium, such as that, which is in Element. Maybe your levels come back where you are lower in potassium. And so we want to make sure those levels are higher or more optimized. And so if you're going to get a different electrolyte packet, just look at that breakdown and then compare it to your lab scores or see how your body feels. So I know personally, my body feels like it gets the most bang for its buck with Element, but for somebody else, they may feel better on Just Ingredients. Their levels of sodium, though, are so much lower. And so for me, it's just not hitting the mark for what my body needs. All right. Now you can also make your own electrolytes. I love using coconut water, putting a pinch of sea salt in it, some fresh squeezed orange juice, and some trace minerals dripped in. And that is so good. For trace minerals, I might use buoy. It's Buoy. And it just is going to help put good micronutrients back in your water, because if you're filtering your water and it's moving out the bad stuff, it's also removing some of the healthy or good micronutrients. And so that's why electrolytes are imperative across the board, and hydration is key so that you are not starting that cascade of nausea and all the things, right? So these are things that I am proactively doing now, and that I proactively did that third pregnancy to avoid common first trimester symptoms. So start these right away, even if you're not having morning sickness, so you can avoid it. It doesn't have to be rough in your first trimester. It really doesn't. It wasn't my first two pregnancies, but it has not been for my third or fourth. And I think that is because of these proactive means. Now, during times of extreme nausea and food aversions in prior pregnancies, here's what seemed to help me. So peppermint tea, I literally drank this all day my second pregnancy to keep the nausea at bay. I was still working as a physical therapist. I had to treat patients. I would sip on this peppermint tea and then run to the restroom if I needed to, vomit, and then go see patients again. Like, I literally was in survival mode. So peppermint tea or sucking on a peppermint can help just keep it calmed down to not feel like it's all going to come up. It's just like an underlying background nausea then, and not like I am going to vomit right now. Avoid spicy foods. So this would include things like curry, and your girl loves a good curry, but that can trigger that heartburn kind of sensation, which is going to further intensify any nausea or feelings to vomit. Ginger snaps, to suck or chew on these throughout the day. Ginger is known to be calming to any kind of nausea, and so that is a good option. Acupressure bracelets for road trips. I used these when traveling with our first two pregnancies for just, some extra support, but it puts some pressure right on your wrist there on either side, and low risk, maybe a high reward. It's worth a try. And then during times of extreme nausea, carbs were all that I wanted. It was the only thing that sounded good, but I do encourage you, please pair it with a protein. I speak from experience this time around that protein makes a big difference. So if carbs sound great, lean into that, just pair it with a protein. And then surrender to what sounds good food-wise. The aversions will go away, and you can rest assured that your body and baby are pulling from the good food that you put into your body ahead of pregnancy. So our body pulls from nutrient stores 3 to 4 months prior to conception. And so ideally, hopefully you were eating good those 3 to 4 months prior to conceiving baby, and that can give you peace of mind that, okay, baby's pulling from those nutrient stores too, as am I, and eventually I'll be able to get back to eating those fruits and those vegetables that right now I just feel like I cannot stomach. Okay. Now, something else I want to tap into about the first trimester would be mood and emotions. There are so many hormone changes that occur during pregnancy, particularly in the first trimester, that can lead to significant mood swings. I certainly experienced this in my first two pregnancies, where I could go from one emotion and then drastically to another with like the slightest stressor. On theme, during that third pregnancy, that was completely different. I did not have any big mood swings. I felt so calm, and that doesn't mean I was always perfectly zen, but I did feel emotionally stable and in control of my emotions, which is certainly not something I could have said for the first trimester experience, those first two times around. I would say this time around, I'm a little bit like in between the two. And again, I think it's from not having the proactive preconception planning for a solid 3 months prior to conception. And so this would be an area that I have noticed, like, I can swing really easy, and I have to pull myself back to baseline. I have to think about parasympathetic nervous system regulation and getting myself out of that fight or flight mode, not only to be the most calm, grounded, and present mother for my 3 kids and my husband, but also to continually create that safe space for a baby, right? Because when our nervous system is upregulated and in that sympathetic overdrive, it can signal it's not a safe time to sustain pregnancy. And that is, of course, always a worry and a fear that first trimester, to speak plainly, is that 1 in 4 pregnancies do end in miscarriage. And that's something that's not often talked about. And it is a worry that goes through my mind every single first trimester. And God willing, and thanks be to God, that has not ever been the case for me. And I, again, attribute that to a lot of these things that I've implemented from that more holistic and science-backed approach to supporting the body proactively preconception, but also supporting the body holistically during pregnancy. And so that is why, as I notice these shifts in mood swings or upregulated emotions, I am breathing. I'm bringing myself back down to baseline and just trying not to let myself get super riled up, because I know that that's not good for me. It's not good for my family, and it's not good for the new little life within me. And so if you're struggling with that, please, please consider joining my preconception program for proactive planning if you have not yet conceived. That will help you lay the groundwork and the foundation to have these tools in place for yourself when it comes time to pregnancy. And then I also have a Holistically Well pregnancy program where I break down everything that I have learned, and you get access to first trimester support, second trimester support, and third trimester support from a holistic lens across the board. I also have specific movement routines in there, like literally everything to support your pregnancy from that natural and holistic and science-backed state from a medical professional, which I think is huge, because I know there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of options out there for you, but to know that this Holistically Well pregnancy program was created with all of this in mind, and it is literally information that I want every single woman to have access to. So that is why I created it for you, and I will put that in the show notes. So, in reflection on holistic habits for filling your first trimester survival kit up from the comfort of home, I would be remiss if I didn't mention journaling. It can be so powerful to put pen to paper on what you are feeling, whether you are having a positive or a negative experience at that moment in pregnancy. You will look back on this time and learn from it. Either way, whether it's positive or whether it's like a deep struggle bus moment right now, you will learn from so much either way. And when that baby is in your arms, it makes every moment of discomfort worth it. So journaling this experience in whatever way feels aligned for you can be a really helpful tool. So in my free pregnancy guide that I linked in the show notes, I leave a section for you to journal. And it is just such a helpful way to look back on this special time in your life. And if this is, your first or your second pregnancy, and you want more kids down the road like me, you'll be able to look back on this and be like, "Ooh, what could I have changed to make this experience better?" Or if you are thriving right now and feeling really good, okay, what did you do differently this time around? Or what are you doing to support your body that you want to replicate in the future? Now, alongside of this, certainly finding time for prayer and meditation, these moments of stillness to truly sit with the impact of what is happening in your body and life, can be extremely powerful and calming to that nervous system. So practicing gratitude alongside of this and documenting these thoughts and prayers in your journal can be incredibly intentional and soothing. All right, so that first trimester survival kit, we are focusing on nourishment, hydration, leaning into rest, calming the nervous system for emotional regulation, and making time for prayer, meditation, and or journaling, to just pull it all together and create the best experience for you to not only enjoy in the moment, but to reflect back on in the future. Now, if you have questions about optimizing your health in pregnancy, do not hesitate to reach out. Again, I created my Holistically Well pregnancy program with all of this in mind, and that was during my third pregnancy. And now, as I move into my fourth, I am really excited to reflect back on every aspect of that program, utilize it for myself, and then also to add to and update anything that deems necessary from an updated literature or research standpoint. So it is a really exciting time to join that program if you have not done so already, because you can move through your pregnancy right alongside of me. So I will link the Holistically Well Pregnancy program in the show notes. Also, be sure to grab that free guide and then send this episode to a friend who is moving through early pregnancy herself, or who it wants to be soon, because sometimes in that first trimester, we just don't feel comfortable sharing it. And women need these resources right away. And so the really cool thing about this podcast is I don't know who is listening. I don't get a trigger of your name every time you hit play. You are staying, totally anonymous, and you can start learning to support your body in this first trimester before feeling like you need to share it with the world, because that can come on your own timeline. So I'm very grateful to share this news with you today. And if you have any questions, please reach out. And again, share this with a friend who needs to hear it, whether now or in the future. Now, take care and be well as you move through pregnancy, preconception, postpartum, and beyond.